You're live.
Okay, no birthdays that I'm aware of. So call the meeting to order, approval of the agenda and order of business, and I have had a special council meeting before COW on June the 2nd. We were invited.
Yeah, we'd like to get permission to do that with council. That'll enable you to consider the final reading of the outdoor dining bylaw.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'd have to wait for the following week. So it's just to get that expedited and in place, if that's acceptable to council.
I want to add something to the agenda when you come to that.
No, I'm not on it now.
Okay, I'd like to add the issue of the new development in Chester. Apparently we're having a hotel, and I think we need a little more information. I'd like to put that on the agenda.
Okay,
I, on the committee reports, just updating Church Memorial Park.
okay.
And I have one closed session item, the land acquisition.
Report that you'll ask for anyway on what we ordered
Yeah,
in our, yeah, so that's.
yeah,
in the
actual
agenda.
version, that's on there already.
Yeah.
So somebody want to,
Move to amend the agenda as.
approve it as amended?
Approve it, sorry, as amended.
Question is, the contract in camera, is that the in-camera
We
item?
need it, no,
No,
that'll just be a motion when we.
yeah, we just need a motion to approve that. That's not it.
Okay.
When is it on the agenda?
It is.
Yeah. Well, I assume I knew it was.
I don't think we added it. I think it has to go, but we have to add that.
Oh, sorry. I just assumed.
Sorry.
So it'll be 9.7? I knew we were doing it, I just. Okay, so move to second it, that we approve this amendment. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Public input, not aware of any. Minutes of previous meeting, Council April 28th, any errors or omissions?
Looking to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Special council meeting, May the 9th. Again, this error.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Okay, we're on to committee reports. Councilor Connors, or ASIP, equity diversion inclusion.
So I've done what I do as a tag team.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the motions were circulated in the council package for your review prior to today's meeting, so you would have received those. They came directly out of our most recent meeting, April 26th, and actually I should have said Tara and Jennifer, who's of course somewhere here, right, in the room virtually, can pipe up, and Pam as well, because we all were in attendance at that meeting, so in case I or Bella might miss something. So the motions are there. We're very excited actually for both of them. The first one is a money request, and it's for $2,000 for an art project, which will see involvement for all of our schools and the students within their schools within MODC to work on a high profile, but very important to each of those schools. So it will be driven by the interest within the schools in terms of what the art project may end up being, if you will. So that motion is there. And I don't know if you want to just move along and talk with the second one or just.
Well, I guess maybe we should separate it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, anybody, any questions, concerns, comments concerning the first motion?
So is this going to grants? Or
That's a good, yeah, that is a good question. Usually committees don't ask us for grant requests.
No,
Yeah, so if we were doing it internally as an equity, diversity and inclusion committee, it would not be a grant. It would be just an item we would use from the fund from the budget. And so I can't recall off the top of my head right now if we had money for equity, diversity, and inclusion in the budget. I think it was a small budget for it, but we also have miscellaneous budget that we could use for it. So,
Well, we can find it.
And we, you know, some of the project that we talked about, some of the, because, you know, on our committee, so one of the girls, you know, talked about maybe doing our project with flags, Syrian flags, and basically, you know, to show that side of it. So, yeah, I think it's a great project, actually. And can't remember his name. He's a teacher from
David.
David is just
Yeah.
been great, because he's a teacher.
Yeah.
He's in the school part of it. He's done a lot of the legwork of the costs and on the school end. So, yeah.
I'll be prepared to move, we approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Second one.
So the second motion is, there's two components to that. And well, basically, it all revolves around the flag raising policy. So the discussion that came out of the committee meeting was around adding to the list of pre-approved flags that we will fly without a submitted request, which we do that annually if it's one that's a running month or a running.
yeah, generally, we go back to the original organization and ask them to resubmit their application. So this would be basically a pre-approved list that we wouldn't have to go back and ask them for. That was one of the requests. So that would be a policy change. We would just put that into the policy that we would have a standing pre-approved list.
Yeah.
And we could do that as a schedule to it. So that it would prevent us from bringing all of those to you when they're generally routine, right? They come to you and we've done them 2 or 3 years running, and
Yeah, we have a few that we do now, so, you know,
there are.
there are a few that we do now in terms of our list of pre-approved,
Yeah, why don't you? do the
almost
issues with
automatic
that?
way. So adding to the list of pre-approved flags, that's one. And then the second component of the request that's come out of the committee meeting is a provision for multiple requests by the same group to fly the same flag in the run of a year.
Why don't we do?
Well, we've had someone in the ask about that.
Yeah.
So I think we have to bring it back to council and ask it for that, if that. So I guess we'll just use maybe the pride flag. We fly that for the month of June.
Yeah.
And I think they're looking at if they could, if I'm being correct in what I read at the meeting, or what I heard at the meeting, is that they wanted to know if they could make a request to have it flown again. Maybe in,
So the request is the next item on the agenda. What they've asked for is that the policy only allows an organization to apply once a year,
Yes.
and it's for a 2-week period.
Yes.
What they've requested is that we make a policy amendment
Yeah.
that would allow an organization to either make multiple requests or to extend those times so that it wouldn't be 2 weeks. It could be for a 2-month period or whatever. So that was the request to
Yeah,
council to
Tara.
consider an amendment.
Well, the problem might be if we've had other requests.
That's right.
That's,
Yeah.
that,
That was
right?
the
How many
discussion.
do you fly? Which
That
one
was
goes
the
to the
discussion.
top?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was part of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So Councilor Church had it bang on there, and that was the concern. Sorry, that was a discussion around our full committee table. And we said that we would, as a committee, as council reps and staff, bring it back to full council, just to flush it out a little bit more. But just what you had said, because it's the dates and the focus groups that we know of now, but we don't know.
Well,
What
we're
might
getting
come
more
into
and more
it.
requests
Yes.
all the
We don't know
time,
what we
so
don't know.
I don't see any sense need for that.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
But again, we thank you for your consideration as a committee, so.
And we said we'd bring it forward.
Well, we need a motion to reject the request. Well, no, I guess we don't, because we're not changing
Just approve
it.
the first part.
Yeah, I don't,
To add a list of pre-approved flags.
Oh, I don't have any issues with that, yeah.
Okay.
Direction
Okay.
to bring back an amendment. for
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so is
Perfect.
somebody making that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. And we're just not dealing with the other one, so it's a non-issue. Okay. Church Memorial Park.
Sorry, you have 5.1A as well. That's the specific request
Oh,
outside of the
request to
amendment
raise, oh
request.
yes, I'm sorry,
Sorry.
raising flag, in Buchanan Road.
I'll move that we do that request.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. Madam Clerk.
Just a little bit of update. Church Memorial Park met and they've decided to get a structural assessment done. They've engaged Sandtech to do this. Sandtech. And I guess essentially they need more detail. I mean, there's been structural assessments done and they realize the life of the facility is an issue, so they want, a detailed condition assessment of the hockey and curling rink. And specifically, if they would include, identify and quantify major defects and the lifespan of the facility. Because they realize that they're told, well, you've got 5 years here, or whatever, that the action's gonna have to be taken to prepare
Oh, they
going
need
forward. They need the information. I mean, I know they've gotten it from various other sources, but they needed kind of a complete assessment, if you will. And, they're certainly going to focus on the beams, the glulam structural beams, and that'll be a big component, but they need more than that. They need an assessment.
Yeah, look at the whole thing, see
Yeah.
whether it's worth fixing or not.
So that is, underway. That's a big, and other than that, they have, spent money. Last year, they spent almost $80,000 just on repairs and maintenance. They put a new hot water heater in, and the change rooms were fixed, and the back end of the roof was repaired. When they redid the roof, they didn't do it completely. It was only the main area. And replaced a curling ring condenser. And those 3 things came in at 80,000. So, they're continuing to do projects and, apply to few grants and all that. But, and they're certainly aware of the topic of the beams. I mean, word has gotten out and they are very well aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
Concerned with the, condition of the rink, but that's all it stands at, no more. But anyway, they're doing that work to try to get some background for a move forward position.
Any questions? Thank you. 9 o'clock appointment, I assume you're here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a place I can plug in my computer or just prepare a slide deck?
It's actually, oh, you know what? No, there's not. And the way we normally do it, I can send you a Zoom link and you can do it through Zoom if you want, if that's easier. Okay.
Can I sit here?
Yeah.
Sure. Please. Get comfortable.
Yes.
We'll wait till she gets it for you.
Sure thing.
It'll
Well,
just take a
in
second.
the meantime, I'm Blake McNeely. I'm the Watersheds and Water Quality Team Lead at Coastal Action. I started in August of this year, so I've taken over the projects, Bayswater Beach, the Refuse Cove contract, and our Fox Point Lake contract.
Yeah, this is the first time you've been here.
Yes, actually, I was here earlier in August with Dr. Spooner when he came in, but I wasn't presenting or anything like that. Yeah. Just to give a quick refresher, the Fox Point Lake program, which is the one I'm going to start with. This was a 7-year project looking at the overall condition of Fox Point Lake. There was a golf course installed along the southern inlet, which caused a big concern. According to our volunteers we work with, it turned the lake basically into chocolate milk. So I guess that's what prompted the project in the first place. So this was the first year or last year, the project that we wrapped up. So we were able to get some nice trends, 7 years worth of data to look at the overall condition of the lake. Once I can get the link, I can go over my slide deck here. Has the report been sent to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I've just included a few of the graphs, and I'll just give a fairly high level or quick overview of some of the parameters that we've noticed some trends in. And then I'll go on to Bayswater Beach, look at the results from that, and then I'll give a quick overview of the refuse Cove and the results from that. Our assistant director, Shanna, she was the one who managed the refuse Cove. So I will present her findings. I think I just got it here.
Are you connected to our guest internet?
I'm connected to my phone,
Okay,
but I
all
can,
right. So I sent it to you.
great, thank you.
Yeah, get him to fix it. Here, go with that one. Come, fix it.
Sorry, I didn't realize there was a presentation. I had it.
Oh, that's okay.
There you go.
Loading up here.
These techies just amaze me how they do this.
I was saying yesterday, 6 hours, I bought a new TV, I have 6 hours trying to make it work.
I've been 3 years trying to get mine working.
You don't want to press the wrong button, I can tell you that.
There it is.
So I think everyone can see that there.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just a map of the area and the project sites that we did. Site 3 is our lake site. That's the only one we did in the lake itself. The other ones, lake 2, our site 1 and site 2 are the inlets. And so site 4 is the outlet. So it's the only outlet for the entire lake. This past year, we were given a total algae probe to use on our YSI device to measure for chlorophyll A and phycocyanin. Phycocyanin is a pigment found in blue-green algae, which is a pretty big issue in a lot of lakes right now. And then chlorophyll is present in any type of algae. So with this, we were able to get a rough estimate of the levels of algae in the area, and then if there's any type of blue-green algae within the algae bloom itself. So as you can see here, very, very low levels. We did see a bit of a spike in October there when the lake did turn over. So turnover is the process where the top layers of the lake become very cooled and they drop, and then the bottom levels mix. So you get a uniform amount of all parameters from temperature, dissolved oxygen. It's the same from the top to the bottom. It happens every year in every lake. It only happens for about a week. So that's when you kind of get a bit of a mixing in the lake, and it's most likely why we saw a relatively large spike compared to the results we got. None of these results are concerning in any way. They're very, very low.
So what numbers would be concerning?
So in the report, I've actually converted these to cells per milliliter. The probe gives us a refractory unit. It measures the light of each cell. And I believe it's about 10,000 cells per milliliter, and we were only looking at like less than 100 cells per milliliter to IX3. Very, very low.
That's good.
Yes. We also took some surface temperature readings. You'll notice the red line straight across each graph. That is a guideline sent by the Nova Scotia Salmon Association for cold water species. I believe the only species in the lake is trout. So that's one of the guidelines that they need temperatures below that to function. So you'll notice the overall trend from every year, the annual averages have always been below that, except for July and August. So you'll notice the graph on the right, July and August, we do see some exceedances of that almost every year, and that's the average for July and August. The lake itself is very high. It was around 22 degrees average for July and August. We also did depth profiles. So that's when you drop our probe down 1 meter, take a reading, another meter, take a reading. That way we get a good picture of the entire column of the water. You'll notice here, so this was a depth profile for temperature and dissolved oxygen in July. So in July, we want the readings to be below that red line And for dissolved oxygen on the right, we want them to be above that line. So dissolved oxygen, again, that's another, the red line there is another guideline set by the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. So cold water species need above a 6.5 milligram per liter dissolved oxygen content to thrive. And you'll notice there is a bit of an issue there where the temperature on the left stays above that guideline until about 6 meters depth. And then it drops below that, so that's good. But you'll notice that the dissolved oxygen drops at that same depth. So there's that issue where there's no real good spot for these fish to be living. So they'll often have to seek refuges in streams, cooler parts of the lake. And this was taken at the lake site. So there's not going to be many fish in the lake area that we were sampling in during this time of year. And then you'll notice the same thing again. The dark blue line is our past year, 2021. You'll notice the same thing in August. Was straddling that 20-degree guideline. Once it did drop down at 8 meters, we did see a drop in dissolved oxygen as well. So the same thing, July and August, the fish are not going to be in the main part of the lake. They're going to be seeking
In the
thermal
deeper
refuges.
holes. Well, that's normal.
Yeah.
That's normal. Yeah, yeah, no, that's fairly normal for this time of year. And then this is a surface dissolved oxygen reading. So again, you'll notice the red line there. We want that to be above, the readings to be above that. And this was the annual averages. So you'll notice the north inlet, which is blue, was constantly below that. That is a very stagnant inlet. There's very little movement of water. If you've ever been there, you'll see it's basically brown, swampy. It doesn't move a whole lot. But the lake itself is great. You'll notice it was up there almost 9 milligrams per liter. So annual averages, it's looking great. Onto pH, so that's the acidity of the water. We took measurements at all sites again for that. And then the 6.5, that's another guideline set by the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment for cold water species like the brook trout. You'll notice that everything was below that. That's pretty typical for South Shore lakes and rivers. That's not uncommon to find around here. We would like to see it above that, but again, it's just the geology of the area. That's why we're seeing that. So that is not something to be too concerned with. And then total phosphorus. So phosphorus is one of the main nutrients that algae feed on. So when you get big influxes of nitrogen and phosphorus, you'll tend to get the blooms. So we measure total phosphorus, and we'll notice here the south inlet. This is the one that runs along that ran along the golf course. So that was consistently very high. That was above the guidelines set by Ontario Ministry's Environment and Climate Change. And you'll notice the South Culvert is one we measure, it's a site we measure once a year during a heavy rainfall event. That was also very high, and that's on the same part of the south inlet, just further down the stream. So there is an issue there with total phosphorus. That is very high. That's a very high input into the lake itself.
So what would likely be the cause?
Various contamination. I think there is a hobby farm along the stream there, so manure, runoff, that kind of thing, it gets into the stream there and will enter the lake. But the good news is here, the lake is obviously big enough that this isn't having a huge impact on the lake. You can't really see it there, but at the very bottom, that gray line, that's the total phosphorus levels in the lake, and they're the lowest of any of the sites. So again, the total phosphorus was looking good year after year, including this past year. And then on to total nitrogen. There isn't a guideline set by any of the government agencies. Dodds and Welch was a paper that we've been using. It's a study that was done on healthy freshwater lakes in 2000, and they found a reading of about 0.9 milligrams per liter is where you want to be at. And you'll see the South Inlet in 2015 was the only exceedance of that guideline. Everything else was below it, so we're not really seeing any issues with total nitrogen at all in the lake. Fecal, coliform, and E. coli. So in the first few years of the project, we were testing for fecal coliform. We swapped over to E. coli because there is a guideline for E. coli where there's not for fecal coliform. There's a recreational guideline of 400 cells per 100 milliliter, and that was never exceeded in any year for the averages. Except for, you'll notice there's a large spike in the South Inlet again in 2015, but there is no guideline to say that whether that was good or bad. Obviously, we don't want that number that high, but that was likely a one-off reading. Moving on to the sediment samples. So we take a sediment sample at the South Inlet, which is again along where golf course was put in, and then into the cove where that stream flows into.
Yeah.
We are noticing some fairly concerning levels of arsenic. They've been increasing year after year. We use the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment recommendation for interim sediment quality guidelines. That's a lower guideline. There's a few of them. That's one of the lower ones we'll use. And then the red would represent an exceedance of the Nova Scotia Environment Quality Standards for sediment. The bright yellow is approaching that first ISQG guideline. Orange is an exceedance of the ISQG, and the red is exceedance of the higher Nova Scotia Environment guideline. So you'll notice here that the arsenic, the top one there, has been increasing every single year. Not really sure where that would be coming from. It is worth continuing to monitor. And also there is some higher levels of mercury we've been seeing the last year in the South Inlet. They've been fairly steady over the last few years that we've been sampling it. It hasn't really changed much. The only really concerning thing here would be the arsenic, which this year we did see the exceedance of the higher guideline for the first time, other than 2019.
But we don't really know what would be caused.
Correct. Yeah, we would still need to do some exploratory work to figure out where that's coming from. So finally onto the trophic state index. So this is the overall health of the lake. So we use different types of readings to determine this. We use a TSI, we use a Secchi disc, which is a little black and white disc that we drop off our boat. Every time we take a sample, we read when it disappears. We do that twice. So that gives us an idea of the particles in the water, how clear the water is. It's a way to quantify that. We use our chlorophyll readings as well, and our total phosphorus. And we put those together, put those through an equation, and it gives us an index, the trophic state index, which we can use to determine how productive the lake is, biologically productive, how much biomass might be in the lake, biomass being things like algae, how much nutrients is in the lake to feed the algae. So over the last 6 years, the lake has been straddling the line of oligotrophic, which means very low nutrients, very low biomass. We're not going to see a whole lot of blooms, and there's not a whole lot of plant life, that kind of thing. We have seen this past 2 years, there's been a shift from oligotrophic to mesotrophic, which is the light green there. You'll notice that the trophic state index is the yellow line. So that's the overall state of the lake. Mesotrophic means there's more productivity in the lake, there's more nutrients, there's a little bit more biomass, there's a little bit more plant life. So we are seeing the lake is currently in the transition from oligotrophic, again, not very productive, to mesotrophic. So it is making that switch over to a more productive, more nutrient-rich lake.
But that will cause more algae bloom.
Correct, that's the issue. So just under the conclusion recommendations, so Fox Point Lake is in a transitional period from oligotrophic to mesotrophic, meaning more algae blooms are likely to appear in the coming years. Coastal Action is recommending that this project be funded at the safe capacity for at least another year. Our volunteer, John McNeil, if he's willing to, we'd like to use our YSI on a bi-weekly basis. So this wouldn't incur any cost to the project. I would just meet him off the highway, give him the tool, and he would take it off his dock every 2 weeks and to get a reading with the new algae probe, which would help us measure more blooms as they start to appear. This again is as if he's willing to do this. I've approached him with it, and he seems like he's interested, but that would depend on his availability. And that will provide us more of a more consistent data from the algae probe. As of right now, we've only been taking one sample a month, which is good, but it's still very sporadic. And as you know, algae blooms can appear and disappear in days. So the more frequent readings we can get, the better. And that's going to wrap it up for Fox Point Lake. Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to discuss?
Well, I don't know. We've been testing it for 7 years. There doesn't appear to be any significant issue with the possible exception of that algae. So
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I guess we're going to come to some conclusion at some point.
Yeah, we have spoke at the committee level actually at some point going to every 7 years and we're trying that. I know it's a cost. I would like to also thank John McNeil because I know he worked very hard. He does. He gets every year to do testing, but yeah, I think that's a discussion maybe at another date. But we have discussed the possibility of, you give the reason. I think maybe we shouldn't do it right now until we get some more, data.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think at some time we have to look at all our lakes, and I've got programs of where we're gonna go with them, and the cost of them and all that, because they are a cost, but, I think this is important for our lakes, and, it gives us an idea, I don't think just for Foxwood Lake, but for all of our lakes, what's happening in Nova Scotia, so I think it's important to have it.
Yeah, no, just that the data seems to be consistently good for the most part.
For the most part, other than the arsenic levels in the southern part of the lake there and the increase in nutrients. We did come up with a budget for continuing the project, just as it has been, and also one for specifically looking at the southern inlet and the southern cove there, which is a reduced cost, just to figure out what is going on with that stream and why there's such high nutrients in it, or why there's all the arsenic in that area.
Just a comment on the southern, because there was a lot of, when they first got to the golf course, we talked about the chocolate milk on the lake. Well, I think that's the root of some of the issues in that particular spot, because there was a lot of siltation that came into the lake.
Right.
Yeah, settled on the bottom, or I'm not sure how deep, but that did cause some of the issues that we did before.
Yeah, Andre?
Well, I think you touched on it there. Obviously, the reason why we're doing this is because there was something that happened with the golf course, and we wanted to understand that. Now we have that data, and it's good, because I think there's going to be a lot of development pressure on that lake in Hubbard, because I think I think Hubbard's is poised to grow, and there's going to be probably a turnover of lands, and developers will be seeking to develop the lake. So having this data in the future will be actually useful when we see how development unrolls. Maybe it'll be in 20 years, we'll be able to look back on this data and take new data, and we'll be able to see what development has done to that lake. But I think that we need to, before we make a decision on funding further testing on the lake, I think we really need to, as you said, look at all of our lakes, and maybe we want to develop just a testing regime for lakes in every area of our municipality, maybe not every lake, but a cross section of them, so that we can keep an eye on and see if we can see some overall trends. That's a wider discussion. I don't think we're prepared to do it now. But these are good results, and it would seem that what I see from the data is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, is that there was something that happened, obviously, that we know about 7 years ago, and there was a detrimental effect, and it seems like it's sort of like
Leveled out.
it seems like it's tapered off a bit, and now it's sort of behaving as like many Nova Scotian lakes do. You're going through its annual cycles, and you see rise and fall of different nutrients or particles or whatever, and that's just sort of like just normal. And I think that if we tested Stanford Lake here, we'd probably see a very similar cycle. Yeah, so.
Question.
Yeah, sure.
So how problematic is the algae bloom that you speak about?
So that's a fairly large issue in a lot of lakes that we're testing right now. There's, right now, the way that the system works is if anybody sees an algae bloom, they report it to Nova Scotia Environment, and they shut the lake down to recreational activity for the summer. They don't do any testing. They don't have the capacity to do that. Even if they did, to determine whether an algae bloom is toxic or not would take weeks for the results to come back. And by that time, the bloom could be gone. So
as the lake gets healthier, it's toxic.
exactly, as more nutrients go in, the more algae blooms happen, the more.
That's the right word, but it seemed to be, I was missing something there.
I think, just to interject, maybe you can expand on this, but I think the term more productive sounds positive to a lot of people, but it's actually negative, that there's more,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so when I say productive, I mean, there's more life, there's more going on, more
That
algae.
reads me like a book.
And the temperatures have risen over the number of years, so that has an impact certainly on the growth of algae.
Derek?
Just to build on what Derek said a bit. Phosphorus, for example, is something that in some jurisdictions is being dealt with from a policy level. So, I guess my way of thinking about this testing and testing that we may contemplate is that we should be trying to tailor any testing around some potential for policy change. So, for example, in Fall River, they govern the way phosphorus is introduced in lands that are being developed, because their lakes are very sensitive to phosphorus and they've seen algae blooms. So if we oftentimes, well, we'll know intuitively that we should have vegetative buffers or you know, setback requirements or things like that, but it's not rooted in science. We may look to other jurisdictions and say, well, we think this is a pretty good idea. So, and these jurisdictions are doing this, so we'll sort of like emulate that. But it's okay policy, but I wouldn't say it's really good policy. And here we have an opportunity to maybe do a little bit of study, see how our lakes are, and then when we want to make policy changes and try to govern the way we develop, we can actually base it on what our lakes are doing. So that's where I see the future of this. Now, not so much focusing on this one lake, but trying to make up a testing regime, maybe by consulting with what our planners feel is important, and taking that back and then making some recommendation to council on what changes we should make in our development policies.
Yeah, that all makes sense.
Like, I'm not sure where the project you possibly have this summer, is that still gonna happen with the, maybe you
Yes.
just speak to that.
Yeah, so we've applied for a grant to perform a shoreline planting initiative. The idea is, you know, there's a lot of shore hardening along the Foxhorn Lake, and we also sample on Sherbrooke Lake. A lot of residents have removed vegetative buffers between the property and the lake. So there's all that runoff. You know, if you fertilize your grass,
Yeah.
all that phosphorus and all that nitrogen is going right into the lake in rainfall. So we put in for a project where we'll be demonstrating which plants to plant along your shoreline, how to do it. It's more of an outreach initiative we put in for it. We still haven't heard back yet whether we're gonna get the funding for that or not, but we're targeting, we put in for 3 resident properties on Foxhorn Lake and Sherbrooke Lake. So the idea is to have volunteers, whoever wants to have this planting done on the property, we would put out a call for other people in the lake to come and see. We would demonstrate how it's done. We would do some pre and post monitoring as well to see the results of that.
Yeah, see if it improves anything. Correct.
Yeah, I think if you're successful in the bid for the funding, that the AHT may volunteer to help, maybe do a couple other properties on the Foxhorn Lake, so we do some more, so. It would be interesting to see if that works.
Yeah, that'd be useful for all of our lakes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Get more data, more information on what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yes, team.
This is a comment, I know it's hard to predict, but when might you know in terms of your success with them?
We're hoping in the next few months with these,
Yeah.
the nature of these grants, you know, it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's a surprise a lot of the time we find out, so.
I'm certainly interested across the municipality, but
Yeah.
in my area, the Sherbrooke Lake.
Mhm.
And certainly we've had presentations by members of the Sherbrooke Lake community
Right.
around algae blooms and environmental discussions, but again, always, it's two-way, and so sometimes it does come back to me as a property owner on Sherbrooke Lake and
Right.
all of the above. So that's all I'll say here, of course, but no, that sounds very exciting. I
Yeah.
really hope for success then for that particular project.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready to move on to Bayswater?
Sure,
Is that
just
the
before I
next-
do that,
Yeah.
the Love Your Lake program in Halifax does something very similar. So I don't know if this is something worth digging into a little bit, but they also help residents with planting plans to help install a bit of a buffer there. So they've asked me to spread the word as far as I can, so.
That sounds like a great initiative, Love Your Lake.
Love Your Lake, yeah.
So Love Your Lake, it's in HRM, Halifax County.
Yeah, and they come out and they help develop planting plans for whoever's interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I can go on to Bayswater Beach here. So
Oh, make sure.
just an overview of Bayswater Beach. I know a lot of you probably very familiar with this. Dr. Ian Spooner's work. There was a very foul smelling black material that was showing up on the beach. Like residents were very concerned. They, a lot of them could smell it in the windows when the windows were open. And this past last month, actually it happened again. I got a call from one of the volunteers and I went out and observed it. It was actually after a storm and it was covering the beach essentially. So what we've done is we've gone through this last summer, we've taken 2 water quality samples after 25 millimeters of rain at 3 locations here. So at the pond, the blue dots are where we've done our water samples. So the pond, culvert above the road, and then the beach just below it. At the culvert, we took total phosphorus, total nitrogen, dissolved organic carbon, and E. coli. At the pond and the beach, we did just E. coli. And we also did a sediment core with Dr. Ian Spooner that was done in the middle of the lake. That was it was 18 centimeters of sediment we got, which was sent off for a metal scan, centimeter by centimeter, and also a stable isotope analysis, similar to what was done in the previous study in 2020 for the beach and the marine environment. So for our water quality samples here, everything was looking great. Our total phosphorus were below the ministry, the Ontario guidelines. Total nitrogen where it was below the Dodds and Welch guidelines that we use for Fox Point Lake as well. And then for dissolved organic carbon, there's not a whole lot of, there's no real guideline, but studies have shown that groundwater systems with high dissolved organic carbon concentrations are associated with increased bacteria productivity. So E. coli, that kind of thing. For the E. coli samples, we really only saw one exceedance of the guidelines set by Health Canada at the culvert site after, it was actually during a drought event. It wasn't even during one of the rainfall events. So we only did the one drought event that was after several days of no rain. And then for the metal scan for the sediment core we took, it looks like the first 5 centimeters are within the last 100 years. This was determined by using lead, as lead decreases, the increase in atmospheric, decrease in lead is associated with the removal of lead from gasoline, from leaded gasoline. So a lot of the times that's how these types of studies are used to determine how far down or what each year is within the sediment core. So we did see that spike, or we did see a drop in lead at 5 centimeters. So that would indicate that's about around 1920 when lead was removed from gasoline. So collectively, the paleolimnological analysis, the metals and the benthic sediments of Bayswater Beach, Bayswater Pond provide a unique signature of local conditions in the pond for comparison to nearby source and ecosystems. If you take a look through the report, there's also some discussion Dr. Spooner provided of the changes in some of the metals would indicate line up with when the culvert was put in and some deforestation activity. That's all in the report there as well. The main thing that I'm really interested in here is the sediment core isotope analysis. So the isotopes here, the triangles on the right and the diamonds on the top. So those were the ones from the 2020 study that Dr. Spooner did. The ones on the right are from the marine environment. So that was taken directly underneath the salmon pen and then at various intervals between the beach and there. The ones on the top there were taken from the beach. And if you notice way down in the bottom left, those are the isotopes from the pond. So now what this means is we have 3 distinct fingerprints. So if we were to take a sample of this foul smelling material, whatever it was, and do the same analysis, it would match one of these 3, likely match one of these 3 fingerprints that we now have. So one of the next steps for this project is what we're recommending. It would be to collect a sample of this material whenever it pops up again. We have developed a very good relationship with a lot of the residents on the lake, on the beach.
Yeah.
And they call me whenever they see it or if they think it's coming. We can go out, take a sample, have the same test done with Dr. Spooner, and we'll be able to match it to one of these 3, and we'll be able to tell where it's coming from.
Because that would be useful.
Right, yeah. So right now, that's really the question, right, is where it's coming from. So we can do this analysis and figure it out exactly where it's coming from now, or if it's not coming from any 3 of these sources, and then that may open up all the can of worms, right?
So once you figure out where it's coming from, you fix it?
That'll be the next step. We'll have to figure out what we can do about it.
Job for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just as a conclusion, the low concentrations of phosphorus and nitrogen dissolved organic carbon suggest that the pond is not rich in nutrients and is likely not productive aquatic system. The analysis of the sediment core indicates that sediment found in Bayswater Pond is distinct from the beach and the marine benthic sediments investigated in Dr. Spooner's report from 2020. The pond has been impacted by anthropogenic activities relating to land clearing, the development of Route 329, and the manipulation of the pond's outlet. So that's seen through the different metal scans. That's also in the report there. Coastal actions are recommending that a sample of the foul-smelling black material will be taken when it next appears on the beach. The sample should be put through the same paleolimnologic we'll call an isotope analysis to match it to one of the 3 distinct fingerprints we now have. This test was about $300. It's a very cheap, very easy solution to the problem. If we can get it, the issue will be getting out and actually capturing it when it happens, because it comes in a day and it's gone the next day. So we're thinking maybe we equip the local volunteers with bottles to take it themselves. They're the ones that will be able to get out, take it, no problem.
Comes in a day, goes out next day.
Yeah.
On the beach.
Yeah.
So how could it be coming from the pond?
That's the thing, is we don't really know where it's coming from. It's we don't understand how it could be coming from any of the 3 locations at the moment. So once we figure out where it is coming
Process
from.
of elimination.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a unique project for sure. I've never really encountered anything like this before. Are there any questions or comments about this? Now it's much smaller.
No.
Presentation, approximately. Okay. And then on to the last one here, the Refuse Cove. This was performed by our assistant director, Shanna. She was unable to make it today, so she's asked me to fill in for this. So the goals of the project were to determine the sources and location of fecal contamination of Goose Creek. So if you'll notice here, Goose Creek, it's hard to see on the screen here, but the top left hand, that blue line, that's Goose Creek. So that's flowing into Refuse Cove there. The second goal is to determine if the sediment of Refuse Cove is acting as a reservoir for fecal contamination. If it's coming out of the creek, is it being stored in the sediment itself? And the third goal was to monitor for algae blooms in Refuse Cove and determine the toxicity of any blooms that do occur. We didn't observe any this year, so didn't need to dive into that. A total of 48 samples were analyzed for this report. We did have initial 3 rainfall samples planned. We did submit 3. Unfortunately, 2 of our samples were lost by our lab, so we were only given 1 result. So we were able to use other data from a local student after approval in the project report itself. Those are the drought samples. You'll notice if you look at the report, there's 4 drought samples. Those are coming from a local student who's also doing some looking into the fecal contamination of Goose Creek. 1 water sample was taken from each one of the 3 sites in the marine environment there, and 1 sediment sample was taken from 2 of the marine sites, and those were all analyzed for bacteria. So the results, the E. coli guidelines set by Health Canada were exceeded during the rainfall event at sites 1 through 6 and site 11. So it's a little hard to see here, but for basically any of the sites below where that light blue line and the dark blue line intersect, that property there has a manure pile right next to the drainage ditch, which is the light blue pile, and it is very high E. coli going into the stream there. So anytime, the one time we got the heavy rainfall event, yeah, it was very, very high levels of E. coli that's going straight into the creek and straight into the ocean there.
Is that allowed to be that close to a stream? Like,
The
would that be a Department of Environment?
The
enforcement?
Department of Environment has a file that's this thick.
Yeah.
On that, and, yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Not just.
You knew that before you even started doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was, I mean, they looked at it, which was, I mean, it just stands to reason. And anyway, and in the report, you do say, look at the Department of Agriculture, what they recommend for manure piles. But anyway, it's an ongoing file.
Yeah, they would have to build a concrete pad and have it all contained within that. So the samples taken from the marine environment show low levels of enterococci, which is the marine equivalent of E. coli, except for the sites nearest the discharge of Goose Creek. So we're seeing that the bacteria is still being found in the marine environment because it's coming out of Goose Creek. The marine sediment samples showed very little levels of E. coli. It wasn't even detected. That's how low they were. So our recommendations for this are to conduct a targeted outreach initiative with property owners within Goose Creek catchment area. Conduct one or more community stewardship days with volunteers to remove garbage observed in Goose Creek and riparian areas. So there's only out there once, but there's garbage everywhere. It needs to be cleaned up. Maintenance or improvement of the small wetland area between the highways to help filter the contaminated water before it reaches Goose Creek. Again, that would be like buffer planting, that kind of thing, improvement of the wetland to help it remove some of that bacteria before it's getting out into the stream. And then just continuing the rainfall and bacteria monitoring to see whether or not
What you've done did any good.
exactly. Yes. And that'll do it for me. So is there any other questions on the Refuse Cove project here?
Yeah, I just didn't see anything in the report, unless I missed it. Down the Crown Point Road, it's sort of a campground down there.
Crandall, yes. So when I first started here, Shannon and I actually got a call to go out to see it
That's
because the
right.
resident was dumping, allegedly dumping his septic tank into the drainage ditch into the ocean. So unfortunately, I don't think anything came of that. We let the Scotia Environment know, so it's really in their hands at this point. But yeah, I think he was. It's funny when we went out there to look at it, the Nova Scotia Environment Inspector was there for a separate.
Septic stuff,
Yeah, so they're aware of it, and I'm assuming they'll handle it.
Well, hopefully, because it's not a good situation.
Yeah, you can find the problem, but it's not
Yeah, it's-
necessarily us who can fix it.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
It's, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? No, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Good job.
Now, those recommendations associated with all of them, and I mean, accepting the reports is the easy part. But I agree with Andre. I think we need to come to some conclusion as to how we're going to move forward. I mean, like in your lake, it appears as though there aren't any enormous issues to, I don't know if we need to do that every year. I mean, I'm not no expert or anything like that. Bayswater, I mean, he suggests we need to do, try to capture and figure out if it's coming from any of those three sites.
I think the issue with Bayswater is that the Spooner report, there was some dispute between those folks that had raised concerns that he may not have had the timing right, and that samples when he took from the beach, he may not have got the material. So, if it's low cost and we can just simply collect that, even if it was a couple $1,000s, it seemed to be nice to put that to rest as a one-off issue, and then we'd be done with it. To me, that's easy and low level stuff.
Yeah.
And he mentioned they could actually pinpoint that from that.
Yeah, and then your Cove over there, I mean, he was,
Well, it's a problem that's,
we know the problem.
we know the problem,
We
and
just don't-
the Department of Environment have been dealing with both situations actually. And they know, even when anybody calls from my area to the Department of Environment, they know without even, they have a file, and it's hard,
Well, you know the source of the problem.
They know, and then, what happens is, they can't, the Department of Environment is the Department of Agriculture. They can't go in and just say you have to remove, they give them a certain time to do it.
Yeah, and it's not gonna go away. until
It's
somebody
like,
does
it's like an
something.
unsightly bylaw here, unsightly premises. You tell the resident, there's certain things have to be done. They do it to comply. Another year rolls by, same situation. They go back, make them comply. It's just, it's like a treadmill, and it's really frustrating because, the first thing that's Ravi's Cove obviously was because our treatment plant's there.
Oh, yeah, and people just
But
assumed we were about.
it was caused, but it's not.
No.
So then, of course, they looked at other sources, and actually Shanna who lives there, happened to get a call and said, look, this guy's discharging. And she went down with a water sample, and it was atrocious. And what do you do when the Department of Environment's involved? But man, it's catch somebody
Oh,
putting the hose right in the water from his holding tank.
Andre?
I would just say, it seems like the report for Refuse Cove is quite complete, and I think it tells the story. If we haven't already, we can supply that report to environment, and then it becomes their jurisdiction. You know, there are many issues that we're confronted with, whether it's roads or like onsite sewage or whatever, that are the jurisdiction of the province. We provide them with the information we have. We've, I think, exonerated ourselves in this case.
Yeah, I think that's
But
a
it's
good
not
idea.
Not
We
our
should,
plant, and
Yeah.
then leave it to them to deal with. And if we have further complaints on the matter, then we can refer them to environment.
yeah, I think we should send the report to environment.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good
So
course of action.
probably the easy part is to have a motion to accept the report.
Accept the reports and share them with Nova Scotia Environment, post to our website.
I'll move that we do that.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried. What about next steps? Do we want to wait and do that? Or do we wanna-
Well, I think
They
we
got
need to know what is involved money-wise, because I don't remember how much we budgeted for this whole water monitoring project. I certainly, you know, have one that I think should be added to the list if we're, you know,
That's a whole other.
well, if the housing development goes ahead on Stanford Lake Road, it only makes sense that we get some baseline data on Stanford Lake, because you know it's gonna happen.
Impacted there.
I agree.
And to be proactive, I know what the, you know, the request will be, and if we're proactive on that, because
You need a baseline.
We should.
it's important.
I think it's a mistake to drop it, just for discussion. We've gone this far, and Vino mentioned it a while ago, about if we're gonna proceed with picking certain lakes to keep an eye on overall, that maybe just dropping the figure of the blue is a mistake. If we have some data already moving forward, maybe go to every second year, maybe we should be looking at another lake or two strategically picked in our municipality, and it'll give us an idea of what's going on. So just to drop it without further, I guess, discussion, I'm not sure it's the right.
No, I don't disagree. It's just that, you know, I mean, okay, you know what it is for 7 years down there. So if you test it 2 or 3 years, now you're gonna change, you know.
I just want to mention one other thing. We have volunteers that do all this work.
Yeah.
And once we lose them, the fear is that cost would probably go up. But I don't know how much, I have no idea. But the volunteers do all the work and all the testing, gathering the samples to the rain Coli bins and all that stuff.
I would just suggest that, you know, I think that it doesn't hurt to get one more year. Like Fox Point, it's probably not a huge cost. And that will give us time to then come up with some sort of plan. I think we can easily think only for a few minutes and come up with a list of important lakes like Sherbrooke Lake, Stanford Lake, Fox Point Lake. There are many. I think we just sit for a moment, we can identify important lakes across our municipalities, and then we can come up with a program to phase into after this. And I also think, as I mentioned before, that doing the additional testing at Bayswater for very little cost, I think that's.
Well, yeah, the identified source.
I would hope that our council would do that, just to put this issue to bed.
No, yeah, I don't have an issue at all with that. It's just that, yeah, it's just that, you know, whatever, we need to move forward.
So how do we move forward? I think we need to add Stanford Lake, I agree with that. Get some baseline data.
Well, I think knowing that there's a major development going in there, it's good to have the baseline data. I don't disagree at all.
So do we put a cap on spending? Do we get a report? I mean, we want to do it, so how do we make it happen?
Well, we didn't.
Why don't we get a quote from them to carry on the work, or whatever they recommend we carry
They're
on?
recommending the same, actually it's less than last year. The cost that they recommended last year was 14. This year is 12,891.
To do all the work that needs, that you've recommended.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like for around $15,000, we'll be able to do all of the recommended.
And if we wanted, you could give us a price on Stanford's Lake, because that's it, okay.
Yeah, so we can get that, and then that can come back to council, and
We can decide.
it would be nice if staff put some thought to, when that comes back, what other lakes we may want to look at.
Yeah.
So that we can think about those more
If-
broadly.
This is common for the cost. Do you have any idea, like if we didn't have volunteers, how much, now I know you can't tell me exactly, but a rough guesstimate?
If we didn't have volunteers, it would be staff time. So I think it's about $400 a day, go out once a month, so it wouldn't be a whole lot.
would be used.
But the big issue would be finding a boat. That would really depend on the size of the lake, whether we can get away with something, the smaller motor, or if it's something larger, like Sherwood Lake, we would need a larger boat.
Yeah, and the volunteers are there on site. They can just boom and go.
Well, the volunteers are important because they're on site, you can see the algae bloom and all that. It's also the people that live on that particular lake, it's their way of contributing to pay for it.
Right, it's all good stuff. So why don't we wait, we'll get the price on adding Stanford's Lake to it, and then we'll come back and cancel and decide on that. See, that's right. Okay.
And since that we are going to proceed with something, that's, I
Need that.
don't know if they need to.
Yeah.
How consensus is getting the budget approval for the Fox Lake?
That's, we put that together, that's what we would.
But I mean, how's consensus for the approval of the budget?
That's my question.
Well, yeah, because if how long will it take you to get us a price on Stanford's Lake?
It would be very similar to the budget Fox Point.
Yes.
We would have to not include the volunteers, so there'd be some staff time. We would have to look at prices for a boat, so we would throw that in there as an option, whether or not we can find volunteers. So we could present a couple different options.
I think that before we rush into do one of that, I think staff and the consultants should spend some time thinking about the testing regime that we want to undertake for this, because we're responding with the other testing based on a sedimentation event that happened when they developed the golf course.
Yeah.
That may not be appropriate for Stanford Lake because we're anticipating future development. So what
Yeah,
you
we
test
want
for-
baseline information.
Yeah, so I think my recommendation is not make a decision today, but maybe in the next month or whatever, when we have a bit better.
No, I was just going on his time sensitivity.
Well, I think
We can carry on with Fox Point and just finish out another year, whatever that, I don't care, that's separate, in my mind.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
I do.
I'm gonna make a motion then to approve the continuation of the Fox Point Water Monitoring Program for the 2022 season by accepting the budget proposed by social action, and it's a total of $12,891.20.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor? Oh, motion carried. I think we need to do that for Peace down Bayswater here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just to identify the
Just to-
source or eliminate. the
Yeah,
source.
authorize staff to fund
Yes, please. I'm not sure what.
sampling and
Testing.
testing.
Exactly, you mentioned $300, but surely there's more to it than that, so.
I'd suggest just authorize to do it. And if you want to put a ceiling maximum on it, I would suggest a
Well,
couple
it's not-
$1,000.
It's gonna be relatively small.
Let's just,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
One sample, one day.
whatever it has to be.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's it.
Move we authorize.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried. And quite frankly, I don't think there's any more we can do. We already know.
No, I agree. I know. I've been dealing with this for 5 years. I know.
The third motion would be to come up with approach for Stanford Lake.
Yeah,
I don't know if we need a motion or just.
no, I just direct staff to talk with consultant.
Come up with, and I think that testing program could potentially be broadened to,
So that's what I have a sense of, for us to start thinking about a testing program, say,
To establish
municipal wide. And to look at linking that to what policy initiatives might come from a testing program.
yes.
I mean, if we know there's an upcoming development or something happening, it makes sense to do it. I don't think we can do this for every lake in our
Oh, no.
municipality.
But we can pick a few each year, do baseline testing, where we think that there's gonna be growth.
We may want to look at the Northern Lakes, opportunity to do it, and look at tax systems like that. You know, I don't know, that's part of the discussion. I think.
Yeah, but I think Stanford Lake one is imminent, like we
Yes,
we
I
know we
agree.
Well, it
should.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, we should have baseline information there, one way or the other.
Yeah,
We know. Okay, so you have to chat with him about what that means. Okay, so we're on to second and final notice.
Alan, I just don't know if you're gonna finish committee report, sorry.
Oh, I thought it did.
He did one.
Oh, you did have one. Yes,
Yeah,
I
he was
forgot
just,
about that,
he was
yeah.
here for this one, yeah. It's just, I think, and I don't think Derek knows about this committee that I sit on. It's a Citizens Advisory Board Committee out of Canadian Armed Forces flight in Bridgewater. They have anyway, we just had our first in-person meeting for forever. I got an update on some projects that they have been working on. They've been working on a project with Parkview. What they do is you put an application in, they provide the labor, they do the work, it's a little, the last few years it's been hard, not just because of COVID, because they had a lot of deployments as well. So based on who's there for an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter, whatever. But anyway, they had a project come in for Parkview. They wanted to build an outdoor classroom. And so it's like in the military, things change. And so the lawyer who oversees the MOUs between the applicant and the armed forces, he doesn't like what he's seeing in the MOU for liability stuff. So that project is at a standstill. But the reason they really wanted to do the project right away, because it's a great recruiting tool for the armed forces to be at Parkview. Their presence there, and with the students. So that's at a standstill. And they did projects in Western Shore. They did projects at Forest Heights. It's a great organization. But that's what's going on there. So this is what they do.
That's what the committee does.
Pardon me?
That's what your committee role is.
Yeah, and we there's counselors from each district and of course citizens. And of course they have their CO there, the commanding officer, and someone in there that does the reports and everything. But yeah, I've been in it since I've been I think it's the greatest thing what they do, right? They did work at church camps, they did church stuff.
I did Gold River Bridge.
They did go, yeah, it gives them
Training.
Training.
It gives them training for their tradesmen. And they built up there, and you got a second, last year, they built it, and it's in Liverpool, actually, right now, on a display. It was something they used in the Second World War. I think it was called, I'm not even sure what it's called, but anyway, some kind of communications tower that was in the ship. Anyway, they had it rebuilt, they rebuilt it there. And it's on display in Liverpool. Yeah.
Just talking with that project at Parkview, so I missed it. Has it kind of streamlined? Is it?
It's right now, the process is in it right now, is that the new lawyer that looks at the lawyer thing. So he's not real, he's risk averse. So anyway, but so right now it's on hold.
The lawyer sorted out.
The lawyer sorted out and say, okay, you know what? Within the MOU that you guys have with each of your groups, we might have to tweak it a little bit. And of course, it's got to do with liability.
Insurance. That sounds like insurance.
Well, I understand where you're coming from. I'm only quoting what the CO said at the meeting.
Blame the lawyer.
Blame the lawyer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, always.
Can't lose.
It's a question just separate from that. Is the budget okay in terms of the materials to do that? Like, is that?
What, their budget, you mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Parkview's are like these.
There's a group that's kind of, it's all over the outdoor classroom stuff in terms of.
So I'm
materials.
sorry.
No, actually, I'll talk about it after.
Yeah, because I can't hear you through your
Yeah,
mask.
it's a group.
You're a low topic.
That sponsors, well, just trying
Yeah.
to talk, not necessarily publicly, but
Yeah.
there's a group that sponsors the outdoor.
It's hard to do that with the cameras on.
Yeah, we read lips over this side, we can't.
Why is it what you say? Why can't it?
Okay, thank you, Abdallah.
You're welcome.
I'll talk to you more about this.
Yeah. Okay, 7.1, second final notice, repeal policy 10 regular council meetings. So we just need a motion to repeal.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. Second and final notice, personnel policy, travel expense, meal allowance policy, motion to approve. Right? Or
Repeal.
repeal,
Repeal.
yeah, okay.
So moved.
Second, discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Second final notice, repeal policy, petty cash fund policy. Mover and a seconder.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion
If
carried.
you're voting opposed, I'll just call you.
I'm just- I'm waiting for the register before I vote. Voting before you finish.
I caught your hand. That's all.
Okay. Second and final notice, adopt expense policy with removal of per diem rates.
Pretty important based on approval of the 3 prior ones.
Yeah, so moved.
Yeah, we gotta have something.
Second.
Yeah. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 7.5, second final notice, adopt council and committee procedural policy, P109.
I have something to ask. on that.
Okay, I'll move
Yeah.
that we approve that.
Second.
Discussion?
Sure. I said before you made a motion, but,
Yeah.
After the motion.
so, but depends if it's discussion on the motion or not. Derek.
Good point. Sorry, I'll shut up.
So within the document, there's item 6.10, and it says, meetings of council shall be live streamed. Those recordings shall remain on the municipal website or another selected social media channel for a period of no less than 6 months. I get that, no less than 6 months, but my question would be is, why would we ever remove them? Is there a reason in terms of capacity or like why would we ever?
That's
Exactly.
Okay, because I don't understand the
Yes.
technology and the weight of stuff.
Our website's not so much an issue because we can always expand that, but if we're using YouTube or we were using Facebook, there's only so much capacity that you can have before we get into different types of.
Live streaming takes up a lot of time.
Yeah,
But we generally, it's, we keep them for at least 6 months. If we can keep them longer, we will. but-
absolutely. So I just didn't get it. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. 7.6, request from corporate strategic management. Oh, no, wait a second.